Will you be traveling to Germany in 2026 for Michigan and Western Michigan?
I cannot say I have that one on the calendar or on the schedule. Yeah, like you guys were talking about, I actually just made a video on this a little bit ago where I was just like, who is this for? Who's going to see it? How is this going to grow the sport? Just watching, Western Michigan get splattered out there. So yeah, I don't think I'll be there.
Yeah, and look, Frankfurt, I've never been, but I've heard wonderful things about it. I'm sure it's really fun. I'm sure it would be a great place for college football fans. But again, if I'm a Michigan fan, just like, okay, the only reason Farmageddon in Ireland is working, or any of these games in Ireland are working, is because it's a game. It's always been a game like Notre Dame and Navy played over there. There's people who are like big fan bases that want to go see that game regardless of where it's played. And they'll go and watch it, and then the locals will come because they're interested. But this is the game that Michigan fans would be like, well, I'll sell my tickets to this one. I'll skip it because, it's early in the season. My kid's got a little league tournament, like all these different things that they could have. That's the excuse game of like, oh, we're not going to go to Western Michigan, but, we'll be there the next week for Northwestern. Like they'll do that. So I don't know why you would, if you don't want to go in Ann Arbor, that you'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go to Germany to watch that game.
It's the type of game where if you're a Michigan fan and a season ticket holder, you go and then you're at home by halftime and you're up 48-0. If you're in Germany for this game, that's not exactly something you can do. And you were talking about the brands they typically have in these neutral site games, like a big game. It's why Kansas State, Iowa State works. Even when it's not necessarily a big game, like the Cal-Hawaii game that was in Australia, it makes sense because there's an Australian pipeline for punters and kickers. And, Hawaii's close to Australia, relatively speaking. So even in the past, it's made sense when they've made those leaps, but this one, it just feels like so out of place. I'm not the biggest fan of neutral site games anyways, but this one, like specifically, I'm just a little, weirded out by.
So we got to see you a few weeks ago. It was good to see you there in Frisco for Big 12 Media Days, but you've been making the rounds, man. You were just at ACC Media Days, and nothing happening there, right? No, I mean, in all seriousness, there's a lot with that league, Belichick and Clemson, and then the realignment stuff just kind of getting dug back up yesterday. What was your experience like out in Charlotte, and what were kind of your takeaways from being around the ACC?
Yeah, it was great. Like you said, I like to make the rounds. It's always great to see how different leagues do their media days too, and the different styles. It was, let me tell you, a mess when Belichick was there. I don't know if you saw that photo circulating of just the horde of people that were there. I mean, you can compare it to how people treat Coach Prime at Big 12 Media Days every year, where it's just a ton of people there. So it's really interesting to see the different levels of attention these schools get, and you understand why certain programs have a chip on their shoulder. Because I'll tell you what, like SMU and Georgia Tech and some of those other teams, they don't get the same buzz and level of attention. And in particular, I think it was Morris. Now he's got an even bigger chip on his shoulder because I just forgot Chandler Morris's first name. But yeah. Chandler Morris, I had like a one-on-one with him for like 10 minutes because there was no one even asking him questions, which is pretty crazy when you consider how close Virginia is to North Carolina. So those things are really interesting for me to observe outside of like the actual answers they're giving, because a lot of the times you're just going to get coach speak and player speak and stuff.
I saw your rankings for the ACC, and that's after Clemson is I'm not trying to like take a dump on them or anything. I think that they're going to be a better league this year than they were a year ago, but it's kind of hard to peg because Clemson is the one team you can look at that has definitely improved and looked like they were improving towards the end of last year, where they'd kind of broken out of their funk from the last couple years. Everybody else may have or may not have, and it's very nebulous.
Yeah, I mean, ever since Clemson turned it on under Dabo Swinney, it's been Clemson tier 1, tier A. You could maybe say Florida State is tier like 1B with some of the years they've had, but for the most part, not really. I mean, outside of that undefeated Norvell season, it's been a tough struggle for them since Clemson arrived, and that's always been the story. Who is going to be that second tier team to step up? And there's been there's been Pitt. Oh, Pitt actually won the ACC that year. Is it going to be them? And then they've had some atrocious seasons. Right now, Georgia Tech's trendy. Who knows? It feels like there's been so many teams. I heard somebody talking the other day, and ironically, I think one of the programs that has stepped up the most, especially over the last like 3 or 4 seasons, is Duke of all teams in the ACC. So you're totally right. It is like a mess. And it feels like no team can fill that void in like the second tier. It even feels like there's room in the top tier if somebody wants to take it. But that's been the ACC's issue. It's just these teams not being able to capitalize for one reason or another.
How would you compare the media days? Was there like something? Because I only know one way. Like we've only gone to the Big 12. We've had a bunch of people tell us like, y'all at least have to go to the SEC Media Days and check out the madness there. But how would you compare it? Like, do you see like, hey, this conference clearly gets more? I mean, kind of pointed it out. Certain schools get more coverage, but how noticeable is it in the way the conferences get coverage, and I guess maybe the way they treat those covering them?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I honestly, my biggest takeaway, because I've been the last 2 years to both Big 12 and ACC, the ACC is like a lot more like traditional. They do it in a nice hotel. They have things separated. They really like kind of shove off the national media to where the national media like ESPN and Fox and CBS, they're just completely separate, and like you're not really mingling with them as much. Whereas in the Big 12, it feels like it's a lot more of a progressive approach where it's open, it's in that field. You've got a lot more mingling going on. There's like almost an aura of pretentiousness at the ACC, just like a little bit more. The food's better there, I will say, that they give the media. So I appreciate it from that standpoint. But definitely a different vibe. So I'm glad you said that, actually, because like there's a noticeable, like discernible difference. And just from what I've seen coming out of like Big 10 and SEC, I can tell there's like a different vibe to like each media day that the conferences do.
You know, every year that Brett Yormark's been involved, they've added like another thing, and then like sponsorable stuff. I mean, the Dutch Bros in the middle of the field was kind of a cool little thing. So my bet would be that like eventually our food comes from us, you know, the official sandwich partner of the Big 12 or something, you know, whatever it is, which I'm sure Dutch Bros is now the official coffee shop of the Big 12, something like
Memphis
that.
has offered to give us 2,000 free sandwiches every media days. I'm sorry, I had to take that.
Yeah. Tyler, at ACC Media Days, they said they've not thought about expansion, even though, you know, Memphis is out there just saying like, hey, we've got money for you. It doesn't really make sense for the Big 12 at the end of it because the money comes from sponsorships, and Brett Yormark thinks he can just get that without having to loop Memphis in anyway. But part of that discussion, and we talked about it a second ago, with Jim Felt saying that the ACC has a problem doing the 9-game schedule because there's 17 teams, to which I don't know if he knows how math works, but if as long as there's more than 9 teams, you could do a 9-team conference schedule for everyone. So I'm not sure what he's thinking there, other than we just don't want to do it is the answer that no one wants, but that's the one he gave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're trying to solve an issue they've already created, right? Like these mega conferences, it creates the issue. If there's only so many conference games and you hear all the weird stats, I think there's one where it's like Georgia hasn't played on the road versus Texas A&M yet or something like that. So like these mega conferences, right? You hurt a lot of the conference identity. Like you're not playing enough teams. Something happens like last year with Indiana and SMU where their schedule just turns out so ridiculously more favorable that it creates a whole mess of other debates. I personally, in an ideal world, I actually kind of like the idea of everyone just playing 8. That way we can get more cross like conference play and more of a sample size to compare the conferences. But in my ideal world, the conferences aren't so massive that playing the 8 games versus 9 makes it to where you're just practically not playing anyone in conference. So in the world we do live in, I would probably be in favor of 9 and uniform 9, just so, you know, you're at least playing as many of the conference teams that you can in conference play.
So I was digging through and knowing you were going to be on the show today, and I meant to bring your magazine, man. You gave me one of your magazines at Media Days, and I'm pissed at myself for not having it to be able to show. I'll make sure that happens next week, though. But okay, thank you. There you go. Yeah. It looks great, man. I've been reading through it, and we'll talk more about that. But there's a tweet of yours that I bookmarked. You had your SEC media poll, and what I found interesting about that was you had Alabama at number 1, which Texas seems to be like the big, flashy new team that everybody's kind of glommed onto being that top team right now. But Alabama, huh? Like what is it about year 2 with DeBoer that has you feeling that about the Tide?
Yeah, and Texas does look better on paper based off of what we know tangibly. But to me, I think the biggest leap I take is I think the majority of people are vastly underestimating the adverse set of circumstances that DeBoer had to face last season. Like, people probably have already forgotten that DeBoer last year, he takes over Alabama. The transfer portal window has already closed. And because Alabama's head coach, Nick Saban, retired, there's a either 30 or 60-day window where anyone on his roster can transfer. So he essentially got handicapped to where he couldn't get anyone and all his guys could leave. And we saw kind of a tough portal exodus for a while there for Bama. Ryan Grubb leaves the team in February to go coach for the Seahawks. He's back now. I love Ryan Grubb. And he does what he can in the spring, but it's pretty well known that in the spring, most of those players are either guys that lost a job. They're in a really unique situation. Very, very rare circumstances. You see guys that are good and starters trying to elevate at that point in the year. And so I look at that. I look at how deep and awesome his staff is. I mean, he's got multiple guys that like not only can be head coaches, but were head coaches of FBS programs on his staff just there, like Kane Womack and Maurice Linguist. Both guys were head coaches recently at South Alabama Buffalo. They didn't get fired or anything. They just took a job on Alabama staff. So I just think the depth and quality of the staff, what DeBoer has done, like what he did at Washington, I just really think the talent is there for him to succeed. And I just think all those factors were working against them in a really tough way last year, in a way that like isn't super initially apparent. And I think it's easy to quickly forget like about that really tough set of circumstances he had.
It kind of